Star Wars 7x7 episode 2029. Well, they dropped the final trailer for the Clone Wars Season 7 on us yesterday, and here are some of the highlights as well as the release schedule for you. Punch it! Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. So, the trailer dropped. It's 2 minutes and 2 seconds long, and it tells us a lot more about the final season of the Clone Wars that will be debuting on Disney Plus beginning February 21st, and that is a Friday, by the way. So, here's basically the top-level stuff I want to mention. One of the things that has been very hotly debated and discussed and wondered about is which of the remaining story arcs of the Clone Wars would actually be represented in this final season. And I've done episodes about this in the past because there were story arcs that, just to give you the quick high level, they completed 5 seasons, and there were plans to do as many as 8 seasons of the Clone Wars. The 13 episodes that they gathered together for the quote-unquote lost missions that debuted on Netflix were sort of half a season of Season 6. So there were multiple story arcs, like for example, the Dark Disciple novel was composed or comprised of 2 4-episode story arcs, and there was the Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir comic series, which was supposed to cover a story arc, and a few other things here and there. The Clone Wars Legacy project that was on StarWars.com that had animatics, like unfinished animation that had the actual voice acting from the cast layered over these, rough animatics and whatnot. A lot of this stuff is out there, but there were a couple of storylines that did not receive any kind of previous publicity, and there was, that was where everybody was thinking, that's probably where they're going. One of them being, of course, the Siege of Mandalore. That features, among other things, a showdown between Darth Maul and Ahsoka Tano, and I won't spoil how that turns out for you, but if you've read the novel Ahsoka by E.K. Johnston, then you actually probably do know how that turns out. I mean, if you've seen the Rebels cartoon series, you know that Maul and Ahsoka both appear in that, which would obviously lead you to believe that they both survived the events of the Clone Wars, so that much at least is known already. But as far as the details of how it all comes about, well, that you're going to have to wait to see the Clone Wars Season 7 to see how that turns out. Meanwhile, there are 2 story arcs where it's interesting, the juxtaposition. For a start, one that we don't know anything about other than it exists does not appear to be part of this Season 7. That is a Cad Bane Boba Fett storyline, right? Meanwhile, stuff that we've already seen elements of, you would think would not be a part of this final season, but it turns out that that is going to be the case. Ahsoka Tano and her adventures in the Coruscant underworld after she leaves the Jedi Temple and quits the Jedi Order, that is going to be a part of Season 7 of the Clone Wars. And that has some significant results in terms of what we know about the story, or at least what Dave Filoni has said about the story in the past, and how it bears on the larger picture of Darth Sidious's master plan for the Galactic Republic in getting rid of the Jedi. But maybe we still don't know everything that we think we know. Sam Witwer, who does the voice of Darth Maul for the Clone Wars and Rebels, and also of Maul in Solo: A Star Wars Story, has said on Twitter, and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically he noted that some of these stories were developed, as much as 5 years ago originally, and as time went on, the stories changed and characters changed, and so there are a lot of elements that are similar, but things do change and develop over time. So it may be the case that this whole story arc situation is a lot different. In the past, we've been told that toward the end of the Clone Wars, the way they were structuring things was to think of their stories in 4-episode story arcs. And so that's why, at least this is how it was presented to us previously, there would be 12 episodes in the final season of the Clone Wars. They would represent 3 complete story arcs. So at least One of them is Ahsoka's adventures in the Coruscant underworld, and at least one of them is the Siege of Mandalore. As for the last one, well, that's still a bit of a mystery at this point. What is not a mystery is the release schedule, and we'll talk about that after the break, but I do want to highlight a couple of very interesting things, one of which is a line of dialogue from Rex where he talks about the clones being conflicted about the war and the fact that if it wasn't for the war, they wouldn't exist. And I know they have to pack a lot of action into this final season, but I hope they are able to explore this concept, this idea in some level of detail. And between that and Ahsoka echoing what Mace Windu said in The Phantom Menace when she says that we were supposed to be keepers of the peace and not soldiers as she's drawn back into this conflict. I feel like there's an opportunity, or at least they're suggesting the opportunity for the Clone Wars final episodes to explore some pretty meaty topics amidst all the action, and that is very cool to me. Also, Maul saying that he believes the galaxy is going to be remade. So I know he was working for Sidious, but I don't think he knew who Sidious was. And seeing how things are unfolding, I just have to wonder whether, he knows more about things than we've, ever expected, or if this is something that he's sensing through the dark side of the Force. That in itself is kind of fascinating to me too. Is he that connected that he can sense how bad things are about to get? Man. It is going to be an action-packed final season for sure. And let's talk about that release schedule. Give me just a second. We'll be right back and talk about that. Hey Rebel Rouser, I've made some changes to the asteroid belt level at patreon.com/SW7X7, and they are all with sponsors in mind. So if you want to get the word out about your business, your product, your service to a dedicated Star Wars audience, then please check out patreon.com/SW7X7 and look for the asteroid belt level for details. Again, that's patreon.com/SW7X7. Welcome back. All right, so the final 12 episodes of the Clone Wars series are coming out on consecutive Fridays and straight through. No gaps, no weird movement in the schedule because of other releases or anything like that. So the last 2 Fridays in February, all 4 Fridays in March and April, and then going into May 1st and May 8th. May 8th, we'll see the final episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars. And I'll start to get you prepped for those final episodes here on the show as we get closer to the date, but for now, that is going to do it for this episode of the show. Thank you so much for joining me for it as always, and may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
Star Wars 7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2020 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.